Exhaust removal part 2. The journey is getting longer and longer, but watch yourself. Hello everybody and welcome to day 20 of my S-Type rebuild. Last week I ended up with having the right hand exhaust manifold detached from the engine, and I will now continue with the other side. As you can see, the exhaust system of this car has a so-called H-pipe design, and the pipes are welded together also here in front, so it's impossible to lower one side down independent from the other one. I learned from my mistakes and will not even try to unscrew the downpipe / catalytic converter. Instead, I directly attempt the exhaust manifold also on this side, and this requires to first detach the heat shield. Unfortunately, the heat shield and its 4 screws are even harder to access here on driver side. At the front, it's hidden behind the AC pump and some brake lines, and at the rear side, underneath the power brake unit. Actually, the official workshop manual only covers detaching the right hand, but not the left hand exhaust manifold, so obviously not even Jaguar considers this doable with the engine in place. In fact, it was quite a pain to get the brake lines out of the way. Pulling them upwards made it even worse. Only pressing them down and a little backwards allowed me to finally access the first screw. Here I'm attempting the second screw right underneath the first one. I was able to grab it with the fingers and attach my smallest ratchet in between there, but the space was much too tight, so it couldn't be rotated, and I had to give up. The screw at the top rear is as well angled to the side and therefore requires an extension in combination with a joint at its end. This makes the ratchet assembly quite unstable, and I had to hold the socket in place with my other hand to prevent it from slipping off the small screw head. At the end I was successful, although not smart enough to present the result to the camera properly. I'm sorry for that. The first of the lower screws luckily can be attempted from the wheel well. And the lower rear is quite easily accessible from the back side of the wheel well. Just figured out that there's no way to remove the heat shield or later the exhaust manifold with all the steering components here in place, so I will have to remove this first. After I had failed disconnecting the drag rods from the front suspension, which would have required removing parts of the brakes, I instead decided just to detach the steering assembly from the subframe and lower it down a little bit. Therefore, I had to unscrew 3 18mm hex bolts, one on each side and a third one next to the steering rod. Finally, I had to disconnect this whole assembly from the steering rod. The two universal joints built in there can either be loosened at the top or at the bottom, and I chose the lower of the two 10mm hex bolts. Unfortunately, the serrated stud that is clamped to the U-joints was a little bit rusty and couldn't be convinced to come out, not even with hammer strokes. For that reason, I had to attempt the upper of the two connections that surprisingly wasn't corroded at all. And after taking out the remaining bolt I had left there to prevent the steering assembly from dropping down, it could be disconnected from the steering rod quite easily. At the end, I still had to detach a plug from the power steering. Job done. There still isn't enough space to get out the heat shield, but I can move it now enough to get access to all the exhaust manifold ports. And of course, again broken. In one piece also. The fifth and last of the nuts I could access from this rear position was the hardest to work on, because the heat shield was in the way already and made it impossible to work with an extension. I had to use a smaller ratchet instead and stick this between the manifold and the heat shield. By the way, this nut was the first and only one that came out without the stud on it. One last nut or stud at the very front still has to be detached, but I'm running out of time. So if you enjoyed today's video, please give it a thumbs up or even subscribe to my channel. See you back next time. Goodbye.